Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Alien teachers marked him wrong, now their entire science system is obsolete. Martin Duncan sat at his desk staring at the glowing symbols on his exam paper. The result was printed in bold red letters at the top, 0/100. Not a single point. The humiliation settled deep in his chest like a lead weight. Around him, murmurs filled the lecture hall as his classmates glanced at his paper and exchanged whispers. Some were confused, others amused. A few, especially the more arrogant members of the Zalarian race, openly smirked. The Galactic Science Academy prided itself on intellectual superiority, gathering the brightest minds from across the known universe. Martin had fought hard to earn his place here, enduring rigorous entrance exams, psychological evaluations, and years of preparatory training back on Earth. He had expected challenges, he had expected to struggle, but he had never expected to be outright dismissed as an academic failure. At the front of the room, Professor Zyeverin, a towering Zealan with translucent silver skin and 4 luminous eyes, watched him with a look of condescension. His long, thin fingers tapped idly against the surface of his floating desk as he addressed the class. "As you can see," the professor began, his voice smooth yet laced with barely concealed amusement, "the results of our latest examination confirm what we have long suspected. While humans may possess certain primitive problem-solving abilities, they lack the cognitive structure necessary to grasp higher galactic physics." He turned his gaze directly to Martin, his expression unreadable. "A perfect 0. Quite the achievement, Mr. Duncan." A few of the students chuckled. Martin's face burned, but he refused to lower his head. Instead, he flipped through the pages of his exam, scanning his work. He knew he had answered every question. He had been careful, methodical. How could he have failed so completely? As Everin continued addressing the rest of the class, "The equations on this test are derived from principles that have governed our understanding of the physical universe for millennia. The mistakes in Mr. Duncan's answers are not simple miscalculations. No, his entire approach is fundamentally flawed." Martin's fingers tightened around the edges of his paper. He skimmed through his work again, this time more carefully. His handwriting was clear, his calculations neatly arranged. He had used a different approach, that much was true, but was it truly wrong? "Professor," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room, "could you specify where exactly my calculations fail?" A ripple of interest spread through the students. Exerin arched one brow. "Where do they fail?" "Everywhere. Every single answer is incorrect according to your system." Martin pressed, his eyes narrowing. "But mathematics is universal. If my answers are wrong, then there should be a clear flaw in my logic. I'd like to see where that flaw is." Zion's eyes glowed faintly, a sign of mild annoyance. He flicked his hand, and Martin's exam floated from his desk and expanded into a 3-dimensional projection in the air. Equations spiraled upward, glowing in soft blue light. "Let us examine one example," Zion said. He gestured toward one of the problems. "This equation models the decay rate of bionic particles in a high-Gary quantum field. The correct method follows the traditional framework used by every advanced civilization." He swiped his hand, revealing the official answer. "And yet you used this." A section of Martin's exam was highlighted, showcasing his alternative formula. Unlike the standard solution, his answer deviated in its approach, restructuring the equation from a different angle. It was unconventional, certainly, but not nonsense. Martin straightened in his seat. "Yes, because the traditional method assumes a linear decay over time, but my equation accounts for quantum fluctuations that can alter the rate unpredictably." The room was silent. Zion exhaled sharply. "A creative attempt, I will admit, but completely misguided. If this equation were valid, it would require an entirely new framework for quantum mechanics, one that defies our established laws of physics." Martin's mind raced. That was exactly what had been bothering him. The assumptions underpinning galactic physics were ancient, rigid, but Earth's scientific development had taken a different path, one shaped by constant reevaluation and bold experimentation. He had approached the problem the way a human would, by questioning the foundation instead of accepting it blindly. Zion waved a hand, dismissing the projection. In short, Mr. Duncan, your failure is not in arithmetic but in arrogance. You presume to challenge theories that have been refined over millennia by minds far greater than yours. Martin clenched his jaw. He could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, some filled with amusement, others with genuine curiosity. He could let it go, accept the zero, move on, or then prove it, he said, forcing himself to remain calm. Zarin tilted his head. Excuse me. Prove that my equation is wrong, Martin folded his arms. Run a test. If my approach is invalid, then the numbers won't hold up. But if they do. The room buzzed with whispers. No student had ever dared to challenge Zarin so openly. The professor's glowing eyes narrowed. You are suggesting we waste time verifying the flawed work of a first-year human student? I'm suggesting you apply the scientific method, Martin countered, unless your physics operates on faith instead of proof. A hushed murmur swept through the class. Even the most skeptical students had to admit he had a point. Zarin's lips pressed together in a thin line. Very well, he said at last, his voice cool. Since you are so eager to humiliate yourself further, I will indulge this experiment. You have 24 hours. Present your case before the Science Council tomorrow, and we shall see just how well your alternative approach withstands scrutiny. Martin's heart pounded, but he kept his expression neutral. This was his chance. As the students filed out of the lecture hall, some shot him curious glances, others pitiful smirks. A few Zarians shook their heads as if already anticipating his failure. But Martin wasn't concerned with them. He was focused on the numbers, the patterns forming in his mind. He had 24 hours to prove he wasn't just another ignorant human, and he was going to make every second count. Martin moved quickly through the corridors of the Galactic Science Academy, his mind racing as fast as his steps. He needed a quiet place to think, away from the murmuring voices of curious students who had heard about his challenge. Word had spread fast. By now, every major academic division in the academy probably knew that a human had dared to question the foundation of galactic physics. He entered one of the smaller research labs, a space usually reserved for independent study. The dim blue lighting flickered to life as the door sealed behind him. Holographic interfaces floated around the room, their projections displaying complex formulas, universal constants, and recent breakthroughs in quantum field manipulation. He ignored them all and activated his personal workspace. His exam paper reappeared in the air before him, glowing with soft white light. His fingers twitched as he adjusted the interface, isolating the equations he had used. He needed to understand what had gone wrong, or rather, why everyone believed it was wrong. His calculations made sense to him. The numbers followed a logical progression, aligning perfectly with the principles of quantum fluctuation that Earth scientists had been exploring for decades. The problem, he realized, wasn't with his math. It was with the Academy's system of thought. Galactic physics was built on millennia of knowledge accumulated by civilizations that had developed space travel long before humans had discovered fire. Their understanding of the universe was vast, but it was also rigid. The laws they followed had been established long ago and were rarely challenged. The moment something deviated from expected results, it was deemed incorrect rather than examined further. Martin exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. He needed to prove that his method wasn't just an anomaly but a valid alternative. For that, he required computational power far beyond what a standard research lab could offer. He had to access the quantum analysis grid, the most advanced simulation system in the Academy. That meant he had to find someone who could get him in. Professor Zayevin would never grant him permission. The Science Council wouldn't allow an unverified theory to be tested in their high-priority systems without solid justification. That left only one option: he had to ask for help from someone with unrestricted access. There was only one person who fit that criteria. Martin left the lab, his destination clear. He navigated the maze-like corridors of the academy until he reached a secured section of the office of the private offices belonging to the lead researchers of the physics department. He pressed the request panel beside the entrance, watching as the screen blinked to life. A few moments later, the door slid open, revealing Dr. Sars, one of the highest-ranking quantum theorists in the academy. His tall, sleek frame was covered in traditional Zarian robes, their silver patterns shimmering under the artificial lighting. Unlike many of his colleagues, he had a reputation for being open to unconventional ideas, though his patience for failure was notoriously thin. Dar. Sars studied him with his glowing violet eyes. "Mr. Duncan," he said, his tone neutral. "I assume you are here to discuss your unusual predicament." Martin nodded. "I need access to the quantum analysis grid." A brief pause. "I imagine you do." The professor didn't move aside to let him in. Instead, he leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "Do you understand what you are asking? That system is not a toy for students attempting to salvage their reputations. The council already considers your equations an exercise in futility. Why should I assist you?" Martin held his gaze. "Because if I'm right, this could change everything." Dr. Spheres studied him for a long moment, then, without a word, he stepped aside. Martin entered the office, immediately struck by the sheer amount of data floating around the room. Unlike the standard labs, where holographic projections were neatly arranged, here they moved chaotically, shifting and rearranging as if they had a mind of their own. Equations looped endlessly, entire star charts reconstructed and deconstructed in real time. It was as if the entire universe was being rewritten in this very space. Dr. Spheres walked to a central console and tapped a few commands. A new interface appeared, displaying a direct link to the quantum analysis grid. "I will grant you access," he said, "but only under one condition. If your results prove to be inconclusive or incorrect, you will drop this argument and accept that you made an error." Martin nodded without hesitation. "Agreed." The professor activated the system, and the main projection space illuminated with a vast three-dimensional model of the known universe. Martin's equations appeared alongside it, waiting to be tested. "Explain your process," Dr. Spheres instructed. Martin pointed to his calculations. "The current model assumes that bionic decay follows a predictable pattern based on gravitational influence. But what if it doesn't? What if quantum uncertainty plays a role, causing subtle fluctuations that alter the rate over time?" Dr. Sars arched an eyebrow. "You are suggesting that an element of chaos exists within a process believed to be deterministic?" "Yes." Martin highlighted key points in his formula. Galactic physics has always treated this decay as a fixed progression, but human research into quantum mechanics suggests that nothing is truly constant at the smallest levels of reality. If I'm right, it means that decay rates can be influenced in ways we've never considered before. The professor's expression remained unreadable. He gestured toward the control panel. "Then let us see if your theory holds." Martin took a steady breath and ran the simulation. The system processed his equations, translating them into a digital reconstruction of a high-energy quantum field. Particles appeared within the model, forming and decaying in accordance with known laws of physics. Then, slowly, Martin's variable adjustments took effect. The simulation shifted. The expected decay pattern wavered, then stabilized into a completely different curve. The numbers recalibrated. The results finalized. Dr. Sfera stiffened. "That is not possible." Martin stared at the screen, his heart pounding. His equation worked, and it had just rewritten a fundamental law of galactic physics. Dr. Savarez remained motionless, his violet eyes locked on the screen as if he were seeing something fundamentally impossible. The simulation continued running, displaying a reality that contradicted everything the Galactic Science Academy had accepted for centuries. Martin could feel his pulse in his fingertips as he watched the shifting decay curve, the one that shouldn't exist, but did. The silence in the professor's office stretched unbearably long. The normally fluid movement of the floating equations around the room seemed to slow, as if the entire space were waiting for some kind of reaction. Martin had no intention of breaking that silence first. He had done his part, now it was time for the professor to process what he had just witnessed. Finally, Dr. Spheres spoke, his voice devoid of the casual superiority he had used before. "Run it again." Martin had expected this. He initiated the simulation a second time, adjusting for different variables, changing conditions that should have altered the outcome. Yet every time, his equations remained valid. The decay rate was not fixed, it fluctuated, subtly but undeniably. Dr. Spheres exhaled slowly, stepping back from the projection as though distance might make it less real. His fingers curled into a fist at his side, and for the first time since Martin had met him, the professor looked uncertain. "This will need to be verified," he said at last, his tone quieter than before. "Repeated under controlled conditions, peer-reviewed by the leading physicists of the Academy." Martin nodded. "That's exactly what I want. A real test. I have to present my case to the Science Council in a few hours. This is my proof." The professor remained silent, then turned sharply toward his console. His fingers moved rapidly, entering commands Martin couldn't follow. Within moments, the floating projections restructured themselves, displaying a secure request to archive the results within the Academy's restricted database. Martin recognized what he was doing, securing the data so that no one could erase or discredit it before it was properly reviewed. Dr. Spheres straightened, fixing Martin with a measured look. "I am submitting this under my authorization. That means I am putting my name on this experiment alongside yours." Martin stiffened, startled by the weight of that statement. A senior researcher backing his theory, that was more than he had expected. "Why?" he asked. The professor's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his gaze that suggested the answer was more complicated than pride or reputation. "Because if you are right, we have been operating under a false assumption for longer than I care to admit. And if that is the case, then the consequences extend far beyond this academy." Martin swallowed. He had suspected that proving his work correct would shake things up, but hearing it put so plainly made it feel real in a way he hadn't considered before. This wasn't just about his grade. This wasn't just about proving a professor wrong. He was standing at the precipice of something far bigger than himself. Dr. Spheres turned toward the exit. "Come with me." Martin followed without hesitation. As they walked through the Academy's hallways, the whispers of students followed them. The challenge had become common knowledge by now, and everyone seemed eager to see how badly the human would fail. Martin caught snippets of conversation as he passed. "Going to be humiliating. Waste of the Science Council's time. If he actually proves it, what does that mean for the rest of us?" That last comment stuck with him. It was the first time he had heard genuine concern rather than amusement in someone's voice. It made him wonder just how many people within the Academy had built their reputations on never questioning the foundation of their science. They arrived at the Council's chamber, a massive room designed for official debates, examinations, and the rare occasions when the Academy's highest authorities needed to pass judgment on something of great importance. Martin had only been inside once before, during the entrance evaluations, but it had never felt this imposing. The doors slid open, revealing a circular hall lined with tiered seats occupied by some of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. At the very center of the room stood Professor Zion, his silver skin gleaming under the soft illumination, his 4 eyes focused immediately on Martin, his expression unreadable but his presence heavy with authority. Dr. Spheres stepped forward, speaking before anyone else could. I have personally verified the student's work, he announced. The results are stable, reproducible, and demand further analysis. Murmurs spread across the chamber. Zyron's jaw tightened slightly. He had expected to humiliate Martin in front of the entire academy, not have one of his own colleagues lend credibility to the human's argument. You claim this work has been verified? Zyevron said, his tone sharp. By what standards? Dr. Sviss met his gaze unflinchingly. By the standards of this academy's own quantum analysis grid. The murmurs grew louder. Martin stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carefully neutral. He knew this was just the beginning. Proving his equations were correct was one thing, convincing the council to accept what that meant, that was an entirely different battle. Zyron turned his gaze back to Martin. Then let us see this so-called breakthrough with our own eyes. Present your findings. Martin stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice steady as he began to speak. He had come here to prove himself. Now it was time to shake the very foundation of galactic science. Martin stepped into the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes pressing down on him. The council seats curved around him in a semicircle, elevated above the floor to create an undeniable sense of authority. The council members were an array of species, each representing a different world that had contributed to the foundations of galactic science. Some watched him with quiet curiosity, others with thinly veiled skepticism. Professor Zyevron stood at the highest point, his silver-skinned frame rigid with expectation, his four luminous eyes betrayed nothing, but Martin sensed his disapproval. This was meant to be a formal dismantling of Martin's credibility, not a serious academic debate. Dr. Spheres remained beside him, his expression unreadable as he activated the central holographic interface. The room dimmed slightly, and a massive three-dimensional projection materialized above them, Martin's equations glowing with sharp white clarity. The formulas hovered in the air, shifting and reconfiguring as the system prepared to run the simulation once more. Zyevron's voice cut through the murmurs. You will explain your findings, Mr. Duncan, and you will do so clearly. Martin took a slow breath, forcing his pulse to steady. He had expected hostility. He had prepared for doubt. But he had not come this far to falter now. My equation challenges the assumption that bionic decay follows a strictly linear progression, he began, his voice firm but controlled. Galactic physics has long treated this decay as a fixed constant, with only minor deviations based on environmental conditions. My research suggests otherwise. He gestured toward the first section of his work. The holographic symbols expanded, emphasizing key points. Human quantum mechanics proposes that on the smallest scales of reality, uncertainty is not an anomaly, it is fundamental. If we apply this uncertainty principle to bionic decay, it reveals a pattern of fluctuations that your models have consistently ignored. Zyevron's eyes narrowed slightly. Our models are built on centuries of verified research. You are implying that all of it is flawed. Martin met his gaze without hesitation. I'm implying that all of it is incomplete. A ripple of murmurs spread through the council. Some of the scientists leaned forward now, paying closer attention. Zyevron's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he remained silent. Dr. Spheres activated the simulation. The projection shifted, generating a digital recreation of a high galaxy quantum field. The standard galactic model appeared first, showing a smooth and predictable decay curve. Then Martin's equation was applied. The change was immediate. The curve wavered subtly at first, then more distinctly as the simulation processed new variables. Tiny fluctuations emerged, altering the decay rate in ways that should not have been possible under the old model. The numbers adjusted in real time, revealing an undeniable pattern, one that the Academy had never accounted for. The silence in the chamber became absolute. Martin forced himself to stay composed, even as his chest tightened with anticipation. He turned to the council. This proves that decay rates are not universally fixed. Quantum uncertainty introduces variability that, until now, has been dismissed as statistical noise. If we acknowledge this, we can refine existing models to predict fluctuations with far greater accuracy. One of the council members, an elder from the Voron race with deep-set eyes, finally spoke. What you are suggesting would require significant revision of our theoretical frameworks. Martin inclined his head slightly. Yes, but it would also allow us to make more precise calculations in fields ranging from astrophysics to particle engineering. This isn't just an abstract correction, it has real, tangible applications. Another scientist, a representative from the Eura system, adjusted his holodisk, analyzing the data in real time. His long fingers moved swiftly over the projections, cross-referencing Martin's work against existing theories. After a moment, he leaned back, his brow furrowed. The numbers hold. A murmur spread through the room again, this time heavier with meaning. Zyeverin's expression remained cold. He gestured sharply, and the projection froze. Even if this phenomenon exists, that does not mean it is of significant consequence. Some fluctuations do not alter the larger structure of the universe. Martin had expected this argument. He had prepared for it. He tapped the interface, bringing up another segment of the projection. That's where you're wrong. If these fluctuations exist, then they don't just affect decay rates. They affect the way we calculate the lifespan of stars, the formation of cosmic structures.